Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football, continuing with our summer scouting series as we take a look at a newcomer to the Big 12 in the BYU Cougars, who you look back at that 2022 year and say, a relatively disappointing year for BYU. This was a team that I was extremely high on heading into 2022, an 8-5 record, and we're calling that disappointing. I think kind of speaks to where this BYU program is at. And you take a look at projecting them into the Big 12. I think this one of the newcomers of the Big 12 that you're most comfortable with heading into the Big 12, because as an independent team, they chose to load up their schedule. This is a team that is used to going on the road, playing Power 5 teams. I think they can make it work in the Big 12. Looking at this 2023 roster, you have a lot of newcomers, a lot of new faces you need to replace, and I think they did a really nice job adding some of those guys in the transfer portal. So now, before we get into taking a look at this depth chart, projecting this team to 2023, I just want to say thank you to you guys. This is my favorite time period of college football, really digging into these programs, taking a look at their schedule, taking a look at some of these position groups and projecting them into 2023. So if you do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Go check out some of our other summer scouting series and some of these other programs in the Big 12, in the Big 10. We appreciate all the support. And secondly, let us know in the comment section. Another reason why I love doing these, I get to kind of chop it up about these programs with some of the fans in the comment section. You guys go a long way in kind of helping me build out my journal of players to keep an eye on. So if there is a player I'm sleeping on, let me know in the comment section. Appreciate all the support, and let's get into it. And let's start on the offensive side of the ball, where you do have some new faces starting off at that quarterback position. Kedon Slovis coming in, relatively optimistic that he is going to be in a new environment, a new offense, and kind of find back what he was able to do during his early times at USC. This is a quarterback in Kedon Slovis who's played at some of the highest levels of college football. He transfers to Pitt, struggles with injury, and that Pitt offense just not a very good quarterback-friendly offense. I think at BYU, he'll have a chance to kind of put on a show of what he can do. And then you talk about who he's surrounded by. I think that goes a long way for Kedon Slovis, who my take on Kedon Slovis, having watched him at multiple different schools, is he's not a Caleb Williams, probably not as dynamic of a playmaker as a guy like Jaren Hall. But when the throws are there, he's going to make the throws. He's a very accurate passer who at USC as a freshman threw for over a 70% completion percentage. Like, this guy, when the plays are there, he makes the throws. I don't know if he's the athlete that Jaren Hall is with how dynamic Hall was, but I am high on what Kedon Slovis can do in this offense. And even going back to some of Jaren Hall's film in 2022, it seemed like he was playing hurt. Like, there was some inconsistencies in the talent. You never question the talent, but I think BYU fans would agree. He didn't seem 100% through some of that season. So kind of excited to see what Kedon Slovis can do within this offense. And taking a look at the playmakers around him, you also have a new face in the backfield, Aiden Robbins, Tyler Algier, Christopher Brooks. You kind of get a feel with what Kalani Sitake wants at that running back position. And Aiden Robbins is another kind of bigger back, 6'2", 220 pounds, a one-cut guy that wants to get upfield, that wants the contact. That type of running back has fit really well into this BYU offense. And I think a guy like Aiden Robbins, who was very coveted out of the transfer portal coming from UNLV, will kind of pick off right where Tyler Algier and Christopher Brooks left off. Now, the one question I think you do have on this offensive side of the ball is that wide receiver position. Losing a guy like Puka Nacua hurts. He was kind of that offense when there was a play that had to be made. Puka Nacua was kind of the guy that they wanted the ball in his hands. Keeping Cody Epps out of the transfer market, I mean, he did go to the transfer portal, elected to come back to BYU, I think is going to be absolutely massive. Cody Epps is a guy that, for one, I think is going to be Kedon Slovis' best friend. You look at where Kedon Slovis kind of excels, those short intermediate routes. Cody Epps, not many better wide receivers at creating separation in his route tree really quickly, being a quarterback-friendly guy, creating separation. Cody Epps, I think, is a phenomenal fit for Kedon Slovis, and you have Keanu Hill and Chase Roberts. Really only three wide receivers that you feel comfortable with. There are some wide receivers left in the transfer portal, and I wonder if BYU maybe tries to take a swing at another wide receiver in this portal, but I think you feel good about those three wide receivers. You combine that with Isaac Rex at that tight end position, who just seems like he's been there for such a long time and has been so productive for BYU. I feel good about the talent, that Kedon Slovis has to work with on the offensive side of the ball. And then the offensive line that I was high on last year. I feel like maybe underperformed a little bit. You go and hammer the transfer portal for some of these guys, and taking a look at the depth chart, reading some of the spring practice notes, it sounds like BYU is comfortable with like 10 of these guys starting, but you have some real star power. Kingsley Suyamata, I tried to practice his name. I think I got it. Kingsley Suyamata. That's what I'm going to go with. Again, a guy that coming over from Oregon was a 5-star recruit, super talented dude. I think can be an All-American left tackle. And then you go get Caleb Etienne at that right tackle spot coming over from Oklahoma State. I think you feel really good about your buckend tackles. You lose the Barrington brothers to the transfer portal, but you have 2 bookend tackles. You go to the transfer portal and kind of build that interior offensive line. This offensive line, I think, will be able to protect Kedon Slovis well and give him that clean pocket, which is going to be very important. Again, Kedon Slovis is a guy, he's a pure pocket passer. He's not that good of an athlete. If you can give him a clean pocket, I think you'll be able to dice up defenses, but you do need to give him a clean pocket. And then the run game. Kedon Slovis, good off play action. If you can establish the run, keep Kedon Slovis clean, I think that's when you're going to see Kedon Slovis's best game. So this offensive line really might be the most impactful group on this offensive side of the ball in terms of how good this BYU offense can be. Now, here's the big bugaboo about BYU heading to the Big 12, and I do think it's on the defensive side of the ball that has just been so bad. And Kalani Sitake goes and pretty much fires the whole defensive staff, and I really can't blame him. This has been a group that has seemingly held BYU back in previous years, and last year it got so ugly to the point where you couldn't really bring any of these guys back. Jay Hill coming over, the former head coach from Weber State, you're going to see a different brand of defense from BYU. It's going to be a little bit more aggressive. You're going to see a little bit more pressure. You go back and look at this BYU program in terms of what they were doing on the defensive side of the ball, giving up a 67% completion percentage, over 30 points per game. My biggest thing was they forced 0.9 turnovers per game. Less than a turnover per game was forced on the defensive side of the ball. That's bad. And so you're getting diced up. You're not turning the ball over. That defense needed a change. And I think I'm happy Kalani Sitake was able to make that happen and get a defensive coordinator that is going to create some more havoc. Now, you might give up some more big plays, but I think you're going to create more negative plays. I think you're going to create more turnovers, which I'm really excited to see how this BYU defense can do that. Now, in order to play that brand of defense, you have to bring in some personnel to do so. And you saw them make that happen in the transfer portal, bringing in some guys. Isaiah Bagna from BYU, I think, is going to be, when he's healthy, very, very good football player. Tyler Batty, I like. Jackson Craven's coming over from Boise State as well. You kind of saw Kalani Sitake and Jay Hill say, hey, if we're going to play a little bit more of an aggressive brand of defense, we need the guys up front to get some pressure on the quarterback. That was another big bugaboo for BYU, is they really couldn't affect the passer. Very bad in the run game, but also just really couldn't get any pressure. Very limited sack production, very limited negative play production. And when you can't get the offenses behind the chains, it's really hard to force turnovers. When you're consistently dealing with 2nd and 4s, 3rd and 1s, it's really hard to kind of turn it up and create some impact plays on the defensive side of the ball. I'm hoping Jay Hill can bring in the personnel to do so, but also scheme up a little bit more pressure and negative plays for this BYU defense to just be a little bit more impactful. Because when you watch those BYU defenses, it just always seemed like they were playing bend but don't break, and they weren't exactly holding teams in the red zone either. Now, if you are optimistic about this defense, I do think it is that linebacker room. Max Tooley, Ben Bywater, 2 linebackers who I both think had 3 interceptions on the year apiece, which for a team that didn't really turn the ball over that much, that those guys were very, very productive. You lose Pili to Tennessee, which hurts, but you go get AJ Bonpachan from Utah State, who was very productive. This linebacker group is really, really good. Now, I think the question is, how does that defensive line in front of them look? Are you able to keep these linebackers clean, let them go be the impact players that I think they can be? That's probably the biggest story, that front 7. Then heading back to the secondary, Eddie Heckard coming over from Weber State as well, a dude that had a ton of Power 5 offers, was an FCS All-American. You have 2 safeties coming back. I think this defense, when you look at what they need to do, I think a lot of it has to do with that defensive line. I actually kind of like the linebackers. I like the secondary unit. This defensive line, though, was such a liability last year that they were getting run on. They weren't getting any quarterback pressure. And you can have as good of a secondary as you want. If you can't affect the quarterback rushing for, it's going to be a long day on the defensive side of the ball. So you ask me about what is the storyline for BYU on defense? How can they get back to being, not even saying they need to be a top 20 defense, but you can't be outside the top 100 in all the metrics that BYU was outside the top 100 on. That's kind of the story I'm taking a look at in terms of how this BYU defense can kind of right this ship. Now, I do want to take a look at the schedule, and it's by no means an easy schedule, but kind of getting back to my point, BYU has kind of made an emphasis on playing those big-time Power 5 teams that I think they're going to adjust to the Big 12 schedule relatively easy. I like how this schedule shapes out. You have Sam Houston and Southern Utah early. You have a lot of new faces. You have a new defensive coordinator on the side of the ball. You have a new starting quarterback. Getting 2 easier games that you should win comfortably, getting those guys their feet wet, I think is really big. And then you have 2 really, really big out-of-conference games. And, well, not out-of-conference games anymore for Kansas, but Arkansas. On the road, I just talked about this Arkansas team on a podcast the other day, and it's a good team. It's a winnable team. It's a beatable team, I should say. And you go back and look at that game at BYU last year, that was like as bad as that defense's look, just getting absolutely diced up. If that defense can look a little bit better, I think that's a winnable game. And I'm not saying it's a night game in Fayetteville, Arkansas, that BYU will be the favorites. But if you can somehow go on the road and beat Arkansas or even keep it a close game, you go into the Big 12 with some serious confidence. And going on the road at Kansas, I think, should be a win. Cincinnati at home should be a win. And even that TCU team, and we've talked about this a lot, the Big 12 is absolutely up for grabs, kind of like it was last year. Like you can lose on any given Saturday, but you can also beat any team on any given Saturday as well. And TCU probably falls under that category. I know they were a college football playoff team, but you go and look at how they played these teams. They won a lot of one-score games, and I don't think it's out of question for BYU to go on the road and keep that one close. Texas Tech is one of those swing games. You got Texas Tech, you go on the road to West Virginia, you go on the road to Oklahoma State. Those are the games that if BYU wants to be a 6-6, 7-5, 8-4 ball club, they're going to need to win some of those games. Getting Texas Tech at home is absolutely massive. That is one of the hardest places to go on the road and play. I think BYU right now, going into their Big 12, their first season in the Big 12, I think it's probably not out of the question, but you're probably not saying this team is going to go win a Big 12 championship. I do think they can be more competitive than a lot of the national media has them. If that defense can come together and under new management, can it be a little bit more competitive? But on the road at Oklahoma State, Iowa State at home, Texas Tech at home, on the road at West Virginia, those games are some of the games that you need to win. I'm excited to watch BYU transition into the Big 12. Again, you take a look at some of these teams. One of the teams I'm most optimistic about as they transition to the Big 12 because they've played those Power 5 teams consistently throughout their years as an independent school. So excited for this BYU program. I hope the defense gets a little bit better because I do think this offense can be pretty solid. Appreciate you guys checking us out again. As a reminder, let me know in the comment section some players that I might be sleeping on. Appreciate all the support you guys have shown, and we'll talk to y'all later. Peace.